Sup, Angels? Today I'm going to be talking about some death metal bands that should have been bigger. What I mean by that was when they kind of came out, they weren't really given the recognition, or they just kind of, not fell off, but kind of fell off, or they didn't hit the level of success that other bands in the genre achieved. So we're going to do like 10 or so bands, just some stuff. First band called Outer Heaven. This was like a local band to Pennsylvania, where I was living. I got it signed. So this was a Relapse Records release. The thing about this one, I always thought it was better than the wave of old school death metal bands that were coming out. Sort of stuff like, Gatecreeper, Genocide Pact, that type of shill for the genre. I always thought that Outer Heaven were one of the better ones. Never really did anything crazy anywhere else in the world. But in PA, like right before COVID, these guys were doing crazy things. But Outer Heaven just kind of stuck, unfortunately, in the mold of like the old school death metal revival bands. Didn't really see a light of day outside of that wave. But like I said, if you were going to listen to one, I always recommended Outer Heaven. Next band, kind of a bigger band, Origin. Should have been like Necrophagist levels of success. Brutal, technical, crazy time signatures. This band should have been like crazy for what it was. I always loved Sociocide, one of the heaviest songs ever. But Origin, like they did have some, like a little bit of success. I think we're on like Nuclear Blast or whatever. But I just felt like they played it safe enough with everything that they could have just been huge household names. Next band, Levidity. Amazing song structures. People take it off as like a porno grind band. That's nonsense. I feel like they were just too extreme for their own genre of brutal death metal. Like it was like too extreme. Like they put Cannibal Corpse to shame with how insane their artwork is, their lyrics, their music. Like it was just too brutal. But they should have seen success just as much as Cannibal Corpse, who was just like a little bit safer than Levidity. Like Levidity could have been insane if they just notched the gore and perversion aspect, but obviously that's not. Why would they do that? You know what I mean? Speaking of which, little quick ad for me. The new Impure Conception. This was our demo. I was not a big fan of the artwork. Kind of looked a little bit lacking, but we are working on Impure Conception number 2. I don't want to share any details, but it is going to be a doozy. Working on Impure Conception number 2. It's going to be a doozy. It's going to have clean artwork. I mean, it's going to be brutal. We're notching everything up. It's going to be thrashier, slammier, grindier, more brutal. But here we are. Next one, Broken Hope. Broken Hope, especially since they were on the same label as Cannibal Corpse and 6 Feet Under on Metal Blade Records in the 90s. The early to late 90s, brutal death metal should have been a Kingston. I say it now. Broken Hope should have been light years ahead of Cannibal Corpse. This, to me, was the better band, because Cannibal Corpse, like Eaten Back to Life, that's kind of like really thrashy. Until like Butchered at Birth and like Tomb of the Mutilated, like it didn't really get like heavy like that. And especially like the Bleeding. By the time Bleeding came around, like they were like slowing things down, and it was just like a little bit more groovier. Broken Hope was just a full-fledged powerhouse of just gore grinding, brutal death metal, like death grinding. Like they had some songs like Grindbox and stuff on like Bowser Repugnance had a little bit more like Terrorizer tempo stuff, but this was just like the pulverizing gore, true brutal death metal, like heavy brutal death metal of like 90s Metal Blade Records. This should have been the face of that, not Cannibal Corpse. Yeah, Broken Hope never got the recognition. Another band just as insane as Levidity and Broken Hope. Mortal Decay kind of suffered from the Levidity problem, just too brutal for brutal death metal, like just too gory. Album artwork, especially sickening erotic, just too, like, how are you going to sell that in a store? How are you going to promote that? You know what I mean? Just, even for, like, the Cannibal Corpse fans, like, death metal fans in general, like, just way too brutal. This has been fully signed by all 5 members of the band as well. This is Forensic. Highly recommend. If you watch my channel, I'm always talking about Mortal Decay. But yeah, just kind of, like, suffered. Like, their early demos are, like, fantastic. And then by the time they were ready for a label, like, Pulverizer Records had, you know, like, Flesh Grind, Dying Fetus, Jungle Rot, like, all, like, mainstay bands. And they all went on to do, like, crazy stuff. Like, Flesh Grind right before was, like, on, like, Century Media. You know, Dying Fetus, obviously, like, you know, one of the hugest things for brutal death metal nowadays. And then Jungle Rot, obviously, kind of, like, after, like, the second album for Jungle Rot, they kind of, like, toned back, like, the brutal death sound. Like, listen to, like, Demogorgon, absolutely insane. But Mortal Decay, sadly, did not get glumped in with that after that wave. Next band, Nuclear Remains. Don't have a CD by them. But Nuclear Remains was, like, doing crazy things. Like, they were touring with, like, Gate Creeper. Like, they were, like, a young band from Arizona, like, just shotting up. And then, like, I guess it kind of got weird because, like, one day they were on, like, Maggot Stomp, and then, like, they weren't on Maggot Stomp, and then they were on New Standard Elite, and it's just, like, I feel like the flip-flop from labels kind of was, like, weird, and people just kind of, like, shit, my camera fell. People just kind of, like, forgot, like, not forgot, but just, like, though when they were just getting, like, a push, I feel like all this, like, weird, then they had, like, member changes, and it just kind of, like, baffled people too much. But amazing band. I love the new EP. I posted their new EP on my channel, too. Next band, Verologist, same thing, amazing demo before this, another amazing demo. This is on New Standard Elite. Speaking of New Standard Elite Fest coming. It is November 6th, 7th, and 8th. It will be in Texas. Amazing bands are going to be on this, like Sick, Submerged, Molested Divinity. That was for Despondency fans out there. So, New Standard Elite Fest, Texas, November 6th. If you're not there, you're square from Texas. But speaking about Verologists, it's like repudiation on crack. All right. It started off as like a one-man band, got better. Kind of the same thing. Kind of like they were like on like self-releasing. Then I think they were. I don't think they were on Maggot Stomp. I don't think so at all. But then it's like now they're on New Standard Elite. But it's kind of like fuck it, camera staying here. But it's like the waves of these. Like I always thought that this was another one of the better bands for the new and up and coming like Cali Kid BDM, as people like to call it. I just call it like young kid brutal death metal, even though that eventually they'll grow up. But the Verologist was sick. They were getting a lot of steam too, like the underground. I kind of think like the new wave of brutal death metal, kind of just like at all. Like another band, Regurgitated Entrails, kind of the same thing. Like this one, I think we're on Maggot Stomp, but it's like one day they're here doing things. Next day, I'm so sorry for this camera, by the way. I'm using my iPad, which I don't usually do, but I've been doing it for a little while now. But Regurgitated Entrails, kind of the same thing, like super brutal, like one of the best albums of that year when it came out. Didn't see much talk about it though. I saw a lot of talk about like the demos before, and then it was like the same thing. Like once the album came out, it was kind of just like, oh, the album's out, and that's kind of unfortunate for some bands. Kind of like, it happens. But no, I think that for modern brutal death metal, Flesh Mangled too, but it was like Verologists, Nuclear Remains, Regurgitated Entrails, and Flesh Mangled are kind of like the big four for me for like the modern like NSE wave of bands, like up and coming brutal death metal bands that really should be like a bigger wave, but unfortunately it just isn't right now. Another band called Morg Walker. This is kind of like grinding, brutal death metal. I thought it was freaking sick. A very cool band. I forget what Varkheis. I think it's like Justin Varkheis. But Varkheis Records, I did an unboxing for them a little while ago. Varkheis is another one of those labels, kind of like super underground, like more underground than something like Iron Fortress or like NSE. Like this is like super underground, but all his bands are pretty much like a lot of him doing the projects. But I think he was also a member of Putrefying Cadaverment, which is another really band that I've been pushing for a while back in 2019. Super heavy stuff, kind of like Broken Hope for the Putrefying Cadaverment. This kind of like Cattle Decapitation if they were good. It's kind of like nuclear war themed death grind is pretty much like a good way to say it. Like not like blackened death grind, like blackened brutal death grind, I guess you could say. But I freaking loved it. That should have been a bigger band, just because so unique. Like, you have all these great new unique bands, and it's like no one cares. We want more. We want the know. I'm not gonna say band names because I'm just gonna get in trouble. But kind of like the new wave of like stuff. Like, I don't want to keep saying Gatecreeper, but like, I don't know. 200 stab wounds. I don't even know what does like J-Dog say, like 200 wimp wounds, something. I don't know. I never listened to 200 stab wounds. I don't really care. Band number 10, probably the most biggest band that never got the light of day, Ripping Corpse. And I have stories for this. First off, Ripping Corpse flat out invents slam. Like, they were slamming way before suffocation. Like, way before suffocation, way before internal bleeding. Kind of like the same way of Demonacy was doing the slam. Same exact thing. But Ripping Corpse, the thing with these guys, they almost had a deal with Earache Records for After Dreaming with the Dead. This is the Splatter Remains demo. Almost had a deal with Earache Records, and David Vincent from Morbid Angel pretty much told Earache Records, like, do not sign these guys, like, because the singer of Ripping Corpse had short hair, and besides Ken Owen and Carcass, there was no other bands that had short hair back in that time. And the thing about that was Ken Owens is the drummer. Like, he's not the face. Like, Ripping Corpse, like, he's the face of the band, you know? And he always wore a hat. And David Vincent thought that it would kill Earache because it looked too much like a hardcore band at the time. So that's like a crazy story. But Ripping Corpse, blistering, crazy songs like Sweetness, Anti-God. I always loved Rift of Hate, especially on this version, the first slam riff. Exhumation Day was a demo song that should have been on Dreaming with the Dead, but the lyrics were too crazy for Earache Records, even though they were releasing, Repulsion, Carcass, Napalm Death, gore, grind, grindcore, death metal. But Ripping Corpse should have been crazy. They have, like, unreleased albums on YouTube you can listen to. Just the time signatures for Ripping Corpse, the thrash, the death metal, the aggression. I mean, for just a band from New Jersey, like in New Jersey, what else did you really have? Like Revenant, stuff like that. Mortal Decay is obviously from New Jersey too, but we're talking like that thrashy, death thrash type of sound. I mean, this is like this predates, Mortal Decay. But those were 10 bands that should have been bigger name stays. They all should have been equally just as big as something like Cannibal Corpse and, Deicide. Never really got there. So type in the comments what bands, don't type in the band, type in the comments what bands you think also should have been bigger, bands that just didn't reach the amount of success as other bands in the same genre, even though they're just as good or if not better, again, and I will see you next video.